Shalom Aleichem to everybody, and today is we're already entering into the 19th day of Elul. Today was Chayil, a very, very auspicious day in the Jewish calendar. It's the yard site of the Maral, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, famous Maral. I was speaking to someone just recently who went to visit Prague. He was telling me about it. He went to the Maral Shul, and we spoke about the whole thing of the Goyim. It's not so clear if the Goyim really existed. A lot of people don't know that. They think, the Maral's Goyim. Everyone knows about the Maral's Goyim. But there's one word I always used to say in there, Yaakov. I said, everyone makes a whole tumult about the Maral's Goyim, right? The Maral made a Goyim. First of all, there's a famous ma'aseh that the Gra, when the Gra was 9 years old, he already learned Kabbalah and he already learned how to make a Goyim. And he was planning on making a little Goyim. Maybe he wanted a little pal, a friend. I don't know what the cheshbon was. And then he saw that a Ruach Ra went over his head. He saw that there was some Ruach Ra. What those things mean, I don't know. What does it mean he wanted to make a Goyim? What does it mean there was a Ruach Ra? I don't know what those things are. But the main thing is that he decided then that he's not going to make a Goyim. So first of all, you see that a 9-year-old boy who's steeped in Torah, even at an early age, had the ability to make a Goyim, which is beyond our understanding. I don't say that the Maral couldn't make a Goyim, but it's questionable. There's no place I heard this from my good friend Rabbi Yehoshua Hartman and other people. They've researched it. There's no place in the Ksavim, in the Svarim of the Maral, when the Maral writes anything related to the Goyim. This doesn't mention it. It's very strange. If he made a Goyim, he would have mentioned it. Papashtus. Anyway, but what I always say is that everyone makes a big thing about the Maral's Goyim. I said, I was bigger than the Maral. The Maral was able to make from nothing a Goyim. Yeah. From Afar, and he took different. I took Goylims and I made them into Talmid Chacham. Or I made them at least into mention. You hear the words. We had a few Goylims come along. Liby, I don't mean you, Rav Josh, or anybody else that's listening. But I think it's even a higher madrega. To make someone that's a Goyim, to turn him into an Adam, that's already a big thing. And so today's the Maral's yard. So it happens to be it's my oldest daughter's birthday. So when I left yeshiva today, I wanted to wish her a happy birthday, and I wanted to give her a present, and I couldn't find a present to give her. The only present to give her is I called her and I said, "Listen, where are you now?" She said she's just coming out of school. She's a yoetzet and a menahelet and everything else. And I said, "Come, it's a very hot day. Having a very, very hot day, very muggy day today." I said, "I'm going to come pick you up and drive you home." So that's what I did, and I gave her a bracha. She gave me a bracha. And she said on her birthday, she has an ability. And I said, she was born on the Maral's yard sites. Some people say, if I'm not mistaken, I have to check up on it, the Lubavitchers will know better, that they say, I think it's the Tzemach Tzedek's birthday also. Tzemach Tzedek. Rabbi Sai, the main thing is we're getting already 18, 19 days into Elul. And this Matzah Shabbos is going to be the first Slichus. We're holding a little bit more than a week away from Rosh Hashanah. Just to say those words, a little bit more than a week away from Rosh Hashanah. Tafshin Pei Beis. Tafshin Pei Beis. I've been trying to think a little bit of what the meaning of Tafshin Pei Beis. I always try to look for a little remuzim. It should be Tafshin Pei Bei. Tehei Shnas Pidyon and Binyan. Pidyon and Binyan. It should be a year, Mitzvah Shem, the Rebbeinu Shem should be Paidas, should take us out from all the tzaras, and it should be binyan, a binyan bayis hadiyat. We should be zeichet to the binyan beis hamikdash, to build ourselves. Klal Yisrael should have a binyan. And I met someone outside today, just before, after mincha, a neighbor of mine. I see that the police were there. It's very, very chashuv that lives next door, and he was very chashuv Talmud Chacham and everything, him and his wife, and I see his son, and there was another elderly woman, and there was a young shoter and a shoteret that were there. So, You want to know what's going on, what's the latest hack. So I waited till after. And then I saw that, they both smiled and they said everything, nice things to each other. The little mice that took place here on Rehov Mishkolov today. What was the mice? And the mice was this younger man. He's a very chashuv Talmid Chacham. I happen to know him. And he said, I asked him afterwards, after the police left, I asked him what happened. He said that he went shopping, whatever it is, after he was in yeshiva, and then he came home. And he parked the car, and then he went upstairs to the house. When he came down later on, the car's not there. He starts looking. He's looking here. Look, maybe he parked it in a different place. We have two entrances, but he wouldn't usually park it on the top entrance, but sometimes it happens. The kids can't find it. Finally, he said, someone must have stolen it. That's the only logical explanation. They finally had to call the police, and the police asked for a description. They asked for the license. Now, it's just worthwhile to note, the police in Israel, there are cameras all over the country. And they sent a police car with a shoter and a shoteret to investigate. And when they got there, they told them, I said, do you have any idea did you maybe lend it to somebody? So he says, no, I didn't lend it to anybody. Didn't think he lent it. Then all of a sudden, when the woman shoteret was saying, think about it, maybe there was something. Finally, it hit him. He tells his son, he says, wasn't there a friend of yours that said that maybe he wanted to borrow the car? It came out that the son had a friend, and he told him, if you need to use the car, you can use the car. And he didn't come along. He didn't tell anybody that he's using it, and somehow he borrowed the car. So they told him that they see in the cameras that there's a dati guy, and they see exactly where he's been traveling, and this and that. So they really knew where the car was. But so I said to this, so what do we learn from this? He said, I'll tell you what I learned from it, is that I gave 700 shekels tzedakah money to the Kupa Seir, the Schus with Meir Balanes, that should get my car back. He says the car wasn't that important. He says he has an older car. That's not the important thing. He had a computer in there he explained to me, dozens, he's a big Talmid Chacham, writes Sfarim. He had notes and notes, and that's what he was more worried about. Rabbi, so you hear what people are worried about? It's not the car. It's what the car is holding. It's really a great, great lesson. To me, and as he said, but what really came in, first of all, a little pachad. Just think about it. Your car's stolen. It's like, it's a little yisurim. You get a little pang. You get pangs. You start thinking about, you're losing something. And I said to him, really, to me, it's like a lesson is that the Rebbi Yehoshua doesn't forget anything. Like we say in davening, we're going to say, Zoicher kol nishkachos. Rebbi Yehoshua remembers everything. So we know today everything is computer, everything is seen, everything is on camera. Rabbi said, Rebbi Yehoshua doesn't need any cameras. He sees everything. Zoicher kol nishkachos. And we have to remember, that's it. We're going to go in front of a mishpat. We're going to go in front of a judgment. And as the title is, The King and I. It's really what it's all about. And a lot of times we get into, Elul, we get into thinking about the relationship. Am I doing the right things? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? We try to make tikkunim and everything else. I just want to mention one line over here from Rav Wolbe that I learned today, that he just says, just a good line, I'm just going to use it. It's not going to be the major theme over here. But he says, Haschalas HaTshuva Eina machshava ala chatoyim ela ha'is'almus mehem. The beginning of tshuva is not the thoughts about the chatoyim, the sins, but the main thing is to remove the shiftless in our hearts. It's almost like a Hasidic Rav Wolbe. He says a lot of times we begin to get down on ourselves, and we're miyayish. We give up. Right? We give up. Nothing's going to change. It's all going to remain the same. I'm going to try it like I did last time, and it didn't work last time. Somehow I can't change. And that's the most harmful thing to the process of tshuva. The process of tshuva is ein yush. Don't be miyayish. Like we say, ein yush b'olam. There's no Yish. Well, as the Svarim say, Yish Shalom Das, the famous Sugi in Baba Metzia. Yish only comes about when what? When you don't have Das. You don't have thoughts. When you're not thinking about who you really are. But the person thinks about every single person inside of us. We have a Nakuda of Kedusha that we can somehow raise ourselves up. And we're all in the Rebbeinu Shalom's world. We're in his holy world. We think about that. I'm in the Rebbeinu Shalom's holy world. What does that mean? The more I connect myself to the holy world of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm in his holy world. But a person should never forget this point. That's a haschala of tshuva. You know, my Rebbitzen spoke today, and I'm going to speak all about a great, great woman of valor who passed away just 2 days ago, Rebbitzen Sarah Finkel. I don't know if one of the pictures here, if you see the picture of Reb Nosson Tzvi, you know, you want to pull it down to Yisrael, yeah? This is Reb Nosson Tzvi Zatzal, yeah, the great Rosh Hashiva of the Mir, right? I don't know if you can see it. Now you get the pictures good. Yeah, Reb Nosson Tzvi Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So Reb Nosson Tzvi's mother, Mrs. Rebbitzen Sarah Finkel, thank you very much, just passed away. She was 101 years old when she was nifter. She was born in 1920. And my wife had the schus to have a relationship with her. She was a chavrus of hers. What did they learn? They didn't learn Torah, so to speak. They used to paint together once a week. Rebbitzen Finkel and my wife had a relationship for, I think, over 25 years, but not in painting necessarily. But my wife was involved with a cookbook that Rebbitzen Finkel put out. Was her first published work, a cookbook which was published by Targum Press, and my wife did the graphic design. It happened to be, I didn't tell the Rebbitzen heard this, that our daughter Yael told me today that she uses that cookbook, which is a great cookbook. It's a great cookbook. She uses all those delicious recipes that Rebbitzen Finkel put out 25 years ago. And for that, started a relationship. I don't know exactly how many years it's been. My wife basically used to go every week, once a week, to paint with Rebbitzen Sarah Finkel. She's famous. They wrote in the articles about it. She used to paint a lot of pictures from her son, Nosson Tzvi, and other Gedolim. The truth is, she was a lot bigger than her paintings, but she loved to paint. And the main thing is, she loved to use her time in worthwhile activities. She didn't waste time. She lived 101 years, and she used it to the fullest. That's what the Rebbitzen said. She used life to the fullest. My wife might have said, Rebbitzen said a little bit better, but that's my nusach. She used life to the fullest. And my wife was there this past Monday. She sat with her for 3 hours, or 2.5 hours, however long it was. And they painted, and the Rebbitzen was very happy. She always used to ask my wife to help her to finish paintings. We have a new painting on the wall that my wife painted, Yibad al-Chaim Tov Maruchim, of a great Yid. Maybe one day we'll speak a little bit about that Yid. And Rebbitzen Finkel passed away, again, it's 2 weeks, a little bit more than, less than 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. She lived 101 years. Let's just speak a little bit about her. There's some famous stories we're going to say, but some not so famous stories. She was born 101 years ago in Poland. She came from Ger Hasidim, and her parents, in 1920, they decided to leave Europe, and they moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, Minnesota, next to Minneapolis. And why they moved there, I don't know exactly why. Very cold country, very cold part of the United States of America. And she grew up, no Beis Yaakovs, but she had her family with big Machnisi Orach, and they were from people. And many, many Gedolim would stay at their house. And they ended up having an interesting interplay that when she was, I guess, of marriageable age, there was a big Talmud Chacham that came to their house to raise money. He came to the community, and that was the house. They knew there was Shem Shabbos, Shem Kashrus. And he happened to be the brother of Rabbi Yehoshua Finkel, the older Rabbi Yehoshua Finkel, the son of the Alter Slobodka. If I'm not mistaken, he was Shmooze. He was also a big Talmud Chacham and Mashgiach in Chevron Yeshiva. And he came to raise money for the Chevron Yeshiva, which was then located in Eretz Yisrael. And it was cold. Minneapolis is cold. I remember once going there for a wedding. Every time I went there for a wedding of the old Ner Yaakov Talmud many, many years ago. Freezing cold. in the winter especially. And this Rav, her father had a minhag that he would wait after Shabbos night. He would see if there are orchim in the shul, and he said, you need a place to eat, and he would bring them home. And their house was like a house mamash filled with achnosas orchim. In the entrance to the house, they would always have the Rosh Hashivas and the people that would come to raise money for different organizations would come. And in the back, she said there were two entrances. The back entrance was where the older people and the poorer people would come, and her mother would feed them and this and that. It was like two different, like Avram Avinu's house, you know what I mean? Different psachim. And that's where she grew up. She grew up in a neighborhood, in a house, which was steeped in chesed. That became part of her. And one day she brought home, her father brought home this particular Talmud Chacham, and he stayed in the house, and he had problems with his feet. So first of all, she went, he had problems walking, so she went, she asked her father, could she get his slippers? She got his slippers, and she gave him slippers that was comfortable, helped him to be better. And then after Shabbos, he wanted to go to visit, I guess, a well-to-do person. And her father was explaining where the person lived. And she saw that it's going to be difficult for him. So she decided, she put on her coat. She said, I'll walk you. And she walked him to the house in Milda, whatever, snow or rain, however it was. And he was able to get there. And I guess he saw what kind of qualities she had. And a week later, he calls the house, speaks to her father, and says, I have a shidduch for your daughter. Who's the shidduch? My son. His son. His son was Rebbe Finkel. Rebbe Meir, I think it was. Rebbe Meir. The father of Nosson Tzvi. Can you imagine? A big Talmud Chacham, he picked her out to be his daughter-in-law. And eventually they got married, and they moved to Chicago, Illinois, and there they opened up a catering business. They had a kosher catering business, and their house was also a house which was filled with Talmidei Chachamim and Chesed and everything else. And especially the uncle, Rabbi Yehuda, used to come there from the Mir Yeshiva. All the big Talmidei Chachamim, Baron Kotler, and others used to stay in that house. That house was a house filled with Chesed. That's the house that Reb Nosson Tzvi Zatzal grew up in. And then there's a famous story which is written in the book, and they spoke about it yesterday. 2 days ago, they spoke about it in the Hesped, about that when Reb Nosson Tzvi was 14 years old, his family decided to go to Eretz Yisrael, to visit Eretz Yisrael in the late 1950s. And they spent the summer in Eretz Yisrael, and the main thing was they visited with their illustrious relative, the Rashiv of the Mir Yeshiva, Finkel. And he was 14 years old, and Rabbi Yehuda called in the parents at a certain point, and he said, you know, your son Nosson Tzvi, he was living in Chicago. Now, he went to the local yeshiva system over there. But Nosson Tzvi, I have to tell you, Nosson Tzvi, we all knew him. We knew him. When I came to the Mir Yeshiva, he was a very chashuv young man. He was the son-in-law of the Rashiva. But we used to call him Nady. He was Nady Finkel. Nady Finkel was a good baseball player. He was a good basketball player. He was the valedictorian in the class. He was a bright boy. He could have gone on to become, a good parnasa, and he could have been a good balabas. And but Rabbi Yehuda saw him. Rabbi Yehuda said, I wanted to stay here in the Mir Yeshiva. A 14-year-old boy staying in Eretz Yisrael. And his mother, Rebbitzen, then was Sarah Finkel. Sarah said, I can't leave him here. He's a young boy, and he has a younger brother, Reb Gedalia, should be Gesund and Stark. Reb Gedalia Finkel, who eventually, today he's a big Rashiva in the Mir, but at one point he was a Rebbe in Ner Yaakov. In fact, I met one of the Talmidim last night, David Ram, reminded me that Reb Gedalia was his Rebbe when he was in Ner Yaakov. We were Zoyach to have Reb Gedalia in the yeshiva. So she had a dilemma, should she allow her son to stay? And she ended up being there for Rosh Hashanah, and the way the story goes is that during the Rosh Hashanah laning, they laned the story of the Akedas Yitzchak. And Reb Yitzchak Ezrachi, should be Gesund and Stark, who was married to Rivka. His wife Rivka was a young girl. She was the daughter of Chaim Shmulevitz. And when they had Kiddush in the morning, so Rebbitzen, Sarah Finkel asked, what was the laning all about? She wasn't the Beis Yaakov girl, so she knew about davening, she knew to speak Yiddish, but she wasn't a learned person. So Rivka knew English, and she explained to her it's all about the story of Avram Avinu and Yitzchak. And she also tied it into Sarah. So Sarah Finkel, at that point, she thought about it, she said, if Avram Avinu could be sacrificed his son, so I can also do a sacrifice for the Rebbeinu Shalom. And she told Rabbi Yehuda, she's masking that Rav Nosson Tzvi should stay in Eretz Yisrael. And when I say the rest is history, there's a lot more to the story. But if you think about it, and everyone spoke about it, it's really an amazing thing. She decided to do that act of Mesiras Nefesh, to let her 14-year-old son stay in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi said, no Zooms, no cell phones. Phone calls were like almost impossible. They used to write letters. One time, Rav Nosson Tzvi wrote back to her, said, I had such a great week in learning, and Torah is so gewaldig and everything else, and she was so happy when she heard it. And she wrote a letter to him. I remember those old letters, those areograms, blue areograms. So she wrote, and she wrote on the address, she said, to the best bacher in the yeshiva, and she put 3 Beis Yisrael. That was the address of to the best bacher in the yeshiva. A letter comes to the office of the yeshiva and says, to the best bacher in the yeshiva. They didn't know what it was. So they brought it to Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda says, she recognized the address from St. Paul. That's Rav Nosson Tzvi's mother. They gave it to Rav Nosson Tzvi. That how happy she was. Rabbi Rebbitzen Finkel was a unique person. She was tremendous balas chesed. She did a lot of chasadim. She did a lot of things, and she loved the yeshiva. But the most, I think, when I say the most important thing, can't say the most important thing. We don't know the cheshbonos, but everyone spoke about the fact that her Mesiras Nefesh created that Rav Nosson Tzvi, that she not only gave birth to him, but she gave the spiritual birth to him. Because we think, take a look today, the Mir Yeshiva today, the multitudes of Talmidim that have gone through the Mir Yeshiva from the time of Nosson Tzvi became the Yeshiva, the buildings that he built, and the continuity of the Yeshiva, which continues now with his son, Rabbi Yehuda, and the whole family and everything else, all due to the act of a Mesiras Nefesh of one woman. What did this one woman say? What did Sarah Finkel say? Sarah Finkel said that I am a Bas Melech. I'm the daughter of a king. Daughter of a king, that's really what she was saying. And she always acted that. She was she was almost like a queen. She always was dressed nicely. She always put together. And my wife always used to speak about it. And every time I would come to visit her every once in a while, she wanted to get my book. And we got her my book. And I remember I came and she always addressed me, Rabbi Liff, Rabbi Liff. She always was very, very royal, Abbas Melech, Rabbi Say. And I think that that's a great message before Rosh Hashanah for us to understand. Bas Melech, Ben Melech, the king and I, what's really going on? If we really analyze it, we really analyze our relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom, and what we could work on. And the main thing is not to be miyayish, never to be miyayish, never to say, it's all the chatoyim, I'm never going to make it. No, don't be miyayish. There's an akuda of kedusha within us. But the first thing is for a person to recognize, I'm a ben melech, I'm a prince. And that's what I want to be. I want to be more of a prince. Instead of saying, my relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom is, well, what do I get from the Rebbeinu Shalom? I need this, I need that, I need good health, I need parnasa. For sure, we always turn to Rebbeinu Shalom for everything. We have to ask him for everything. But there's a deeper relationship. The relationship is not just what do I get from the Rebbeinu Shalom. What is the Rebbeinu Shalom giving me? He gives me everything. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the king, and I'm the Ben Melech. So I'm the Ben Melech. I have to act in a certain way. I talk a certain way. I eat a certain way. I thank a certain way. I walk a certain way. I think a certain way. That's the relationship of a person. That's the way we have to begin to think. And for sure, we all have our cheshbon is what we have to get fixed up. What we have to fix up. And the world today, I'm going to read a line over here. Joel Azuri wrote me this from Rab Mansour in the Navi, the Haftarah. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. This week's parasha, Yeshaya Navi foresees the time. That's what you'll take a look at the words in the Haftarah. When darkness will cover the earth, and fog will cover the nations. Interesting. But upon you, God shall shine. Klal Yisrael. As the Mishnah teaches in the end of Masechet Sotah, the period before the final redemption will be one of chaos and turmoil. The world will be thrust into darkness. There will be crises, upheavals, widespread moral decay. Think about it. Crises, upheavals. widespread moral decay. It's like very, very clear. Just at the darkest point of the night is the moment before daybreak. The period before the final redemption will be the darkest era. And here he mentions the Maral of Prague. He doesn't say this, the Yartzit, but it's very, very apropos. Explains that Hashem created the world in such a way that growth and progress must be preceded by darkness. Vayerev, Vayivaker. It's Erev. And darkness is a period of demise. When a seed is planted in the ground, it decays before producing nourishing, delicious food. Construction must be preceded by destruction. And so the world's most glorious moment, the arrival of Mashiach, will be preceded by a period of darkness and crisis. I was looking at it in a little bit of a different context. This concept of the Parshas Kisov, it's a difficult Parsha on a simple fashion. The beginning of the Parsha is very, very upbeat. It's very geschmack. Wow. Kisov el Aretz, you're going to come to Eretz Yisrael. Wow. You're going to get the Reish Priyadama. All the Bikurim. Oh, you're going to go up in front of the Kayin. And he's going to take the Tena Yedecha. And you say all these words, Rabbi Yehoshua Liff, and I called out, because Baruch Hu took us out. And now I'm bringing you my first fruits. Eretz Avas Cholot Devash. Wow, the land of flowing milk and honey. What a great place. You got to be so happy of all the goodness. Wow, what a great way to beginning a parsha. And then later on the parsha, Baruch atah b'yir, Baruch atah b'tezecha. Wow, all the great brachas that you're going to get when you keep the Torah. V'hayim shemaya tishma. Then you're going to get all good. But then all of a sudden the second half comes. It's like this. It's like lahavdol elef alfei avdolas. Okay, first half went great. You're up 21-0. Everything was clicking. The front line was going. The D line was going. The passing was clicking. The running backs they're going. All of a sudden the second half comes. You get shmais from over here. Before you know it, you're down 48-21. Like, what happened? We didn't score a touchdown and get nothing. What does the pasuk say? If you're not going to listen, all the terrible. I was learning with my chavrusa today. You just read the words, you get afraid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to send me'era, mehuma. Just the words themselves are like scary. Me'era, mehuma, migeres, ad hishamdecha. Listen to this pasuk. Yad bek Hashem b'chos hadaver. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be medabek yourselves with dever. Pan-epidemic. Ad kaloises until you get removed from the earth. Asher atav Hashem l'mishta, you get removed from Eretz Yisrael. Pretty bad things. Bashachefes, bakadachas, badalekes. Rashi explains all these different terms. This temperature, that temperature. I was speaking to a friend of mine outside, speaking about the Delta variant. It's going around. It's crazy. Not normal. And people are getting affected. And then there's another pasuk here. Yakach Hashem b'shigoyin. Bivarim Siman Leva. We're going to be mamish like bishigoyin. And this is the pasuk. We're going to be like feeling out in the midst of the day, like a blind person is in the darkness. We're not going to know where to go. So the kids, it's like, beginning, it's like really nice and upbeat. Later on, it's like really, really tough. Now we know we read this because we want to get rid of the klolos. We should get rid of tichle shana v'kilaseh, v'tachol shana birchaseh. We know the reason why the klolos come is because we don't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tachat shir levad Hashem lakecha b'simcha b'tuv leiv, which is really the theme that we got to get back to. We got to be b'simcha. But it's just a hard thing to understand. Like, the real question is, we see the Rebbeinu Shalom bringing so much tzaros into the world. And it's a zman of din. And it's very, very hard when you're in a zman of din. I've mentioned it a few times. We have a neighbor in the building, 19-year-old boy. I just spoke to his mother last night. He's on an iron lung. We're just davening Yonason, Simcha, Ben, Leah, Rivka, Shnav, Refuah, Shlema. And he's just one of so many that need refuahs and Yeshuas. And I spoke this week, I spoke to a friend of mine who I didn't realize at the time, he's the grandfather of the Kaddish, Shmuley Silverberg from Denver. Hashem Yimkem Damav, a Kaddish, and a yeshiva bacher, and his father, Rabbi Burstein, was a great Rebbe in Tab for many, many years. and Ruach HaTorah. We have a great relationship. I called him up. I was Menachem him, and we spoke about his son. But so much Yisurim, so much Nisyanis. But there's a piece that I learned from Rav Olby today that really, I think, just capsulizes that. We'll just paraphrase some of the terms over here. Rabbi Yerucham says, "Beli mainim umafriyim, beli ma'akvim le'teitzi avos Hashem." If there aren't difficulties, there aren't barriers, there aren't nisyanis, then you really can't get to true avos Hashem. All the Gedolim only came to the madrigas that they came to dafka al yedei Yetzer Hara, through the Yetzer Hara. All the schusim come about when a person is battling the Yetzer Hara and he finds a new way somehow to be able to overcome the Yetzer Hara with the help of Hashem. Lefum tzara agra. In popular terms, no pain, no gain. No pain, no gain. But we say the real pain is the fighting, the difficulties in order to be able to maintain a spiritual lifestyle. That's really what we're judged about. We're judged about three people that they obligate us in Talmud Torah: the Ani, the Ashir, and the Rasha. We'll just speak about one of them. The Rasha, Yosef. That's the Rasha. If the Rasha comes along and says, "I can't learn Torah because I have such a Yetzer Hara," but people have a great Yetzer Hara, no question about it. So we say, "Were you more beautiful and handsome than Yosef?" Yosef a tzaddik. He was enticed by Eishes Potifar, and he still was able to overcome it. This is really what it's all about. What it's all about is that how do we deal with nisyanis? And I think that when we see that there's darkness that's covering over the land, when everything seems to be so dismal, when there's cosmic changes in the way people are living in the world. People are not the same. I spoke to a few people at a wedding last night, a beautiful wedding last night, a chasna. I spoke to someone who's in business. He says, no, he hasn't traveled in 2 years. He's finding he can do a lot more business on Zoom. Yeah. I spoke to Rav Michal Guterman. Rav Michal Guterman is the head of Shuvu. He himself is a tzaddik. He used to live here, and I know him for many, many years. And he says to me, no, he's not traveling. He's doing everything on Zoom. He says, then Zoom, no, the Gvir used to have answers. No, I'm traveling, I'm flying. I don't know if I can get you. No, you're not flying. You're home. You're in the office. Rabbi Sai, the world is collapsing in the aspect of what we thought is the way the world should be. But it's all the planting of the seeds. The Rebbe Hashem is creating this because he wants to see, hey, are you still holding to it? Do you still have the emunah in Hashem? Or all of a sudden, things you don't have emunah in Hashem. All of a sudden, you start running after this thing and that thing. I have to tell you this. It was this little line. There's some people look at Naftali Bennett, who's now the prime minister, in a negative light because he's not really very encouraging for the religious parties and everything that we need and everything else. But they say that there's a picture. I didn't see it, but you have to give credit where credit is due. There's a picture of him putting on tefillin. Okay, now he went to the White House to meet with Joe Biden, and a picture of him putting on tefillin. So that's a schus. It's a schus that a prime minister is wearing a pair of tefillin. That's no question. That's a schus, and at least it shows that that's a ma'aseh mitzvah that he does. So we that's what we have to understand. Where do we hold ourselves when the going gets tough? Does the tough get going? I think that's the message. Yeah, the beginning of the parsha is upbeat. Samachta b'chol ha'tov. We have to be thankful and we have to be grateful. If we're not grateful for all the goodness and kindness that Baruch Hu gives us, and it's every single aspect. And I saw in the Sefer that the goodness and kindness, real gratefulness is when you go through hardships. When a person went through hardship, person chas v'shalom had to go through a difficult situation and he came out of it and he recognized it was all because of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Then the gratitude is a different gratitude. When everything just goes on, it's all on gravy train, just getting everything, it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove anything. What's the final message that we can give you tonight is the famous words of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, very famous, it's even turned into a song by Rav Pelei. But what he says is, on the pasuk of V'samachta b'chol ha'tov, very famous Or Chaim HaKadosh, we've mentioned it, and I'm sure you heard it before, but it's worthwhile just to repeat it. The pasuk says, V'samachta b'chol ha'tov. What is all the goodness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us? So that Or Chaim says two perushim. One thing is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of goodness. He's Tov. V'samachta b'chol ha'tov. Ki davar ze ein erech elav ela matnas chin. He's Chayil kol ha'tov. He includes all the Tov. And that means don't look at anything else. You want to know where your paycheck is coming from? Your paycheck is coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom. So why are you running after this thing, after that thing? Go to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Dive into him. Loi de malach, loi de saraf, you're going to get it. And I think that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling us now with everything that we've been going through. Hey, hi, I'm here. Do you hear me? Do you see me? Rebbeinu Shalom, let's wake up. Let's not run after all the other things. Now we have to do ishtadlis. That's all ishtadlis. But the real source of everything is the real type is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then he says something else. Gam yirmez b'mamar kol ha'tov el ha'torah. The real Torah is Torah. The Ein Torah El Torah. And he says this famous word that people would know. Priests will really begin to understand the deliciousness, the arevas, the wonderful taste of the Torah. They literally run after it, like it says before. Later on, Meshugayim. The real Meshugayim is run after Torah, like the way the great Gedolim run after the Reb Moshe Sternbach, Shlita, was in the hospital. We still should daven for him, Moshe ben Devar, but he got out of the hospital, he's home, and he went to give a shir in his yeshiva. And they had to hold him back. He wanted to go right away, like straight from the hospital. And what did he speak about? He spoke to the Bachrim to write down their shiurim, just writing, ksivas hachidushim, not to write new chidushim, just write over the shir, that itself. And he is a prolific writer. All his whole life he's been writing, putting out, and he continues to put out. If a person would really know how great the Torah is, then everything else pales in comparison. Rabbi said, in the end of the day, if we want to know an Eitzah Tova before Rosh Hashanah, and these days, not going to wait till Rosh Hashanah, but it's really to take a look and say, hey, look what kind of goodness HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving me. And what is true good? True goodness is my relationship with the Torah. The relationship with the Torah is multifaceted. It means the learning of the Torah, the keeping of the Torah, the Ben Adam L'Chaveiroi, the Tefillah, every aspect of the Torah. But the Taiv in the world is the Torah. And the Taiv in the Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the 19th day of Elul. And as we said before, Shetanei Shnas, Pidyon ubinyan. We should be able to be buying ourselves, build ourselves, to be nifta. And we want to give a bracha. The king and I, Rabbi, so that's it. The king and I. I'm with the king. The king is with me. Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. And to hear about a great woman of valor who knew that she was a bas melech. And therefore she was willing to send her son, to keep her son, a 14-year-old boy, away from her. It wasn't an easy thing. She cried. She had tears. It wasn't a simple thing for her. Yeah, as you know what it is to be a mother, but she was a real Jewish mother. And look what came out of that. What came out of that? The malchus of the Mir Yeshiva came out of that act. Rabbi said, what could we do to be makriv a little bit to the Melech Malachim Malachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos. Pleasure to spend time with you. And we should be Zoichem Mitzvah Hashem. The Shabbos should bring us into Kisavei Al Oretz, Eretz Zavas Cholav V'Davash, land flowing of milk and honey, not like the land of flowing of milk and money, America. And we're mispalo for all Yidden, B'chol Makom Shehem. They should be well. There should be Yeshuas. There should be Refuas. Wishing everyone a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come into your home or your car or your office or wherever you are. And again, we want to give a little shout out to JFoundations for all the help. And everyone should please enjoy the platform. And we should be Zoichem Mitzvah Hashem. Mashiach Tzidkeinu Herav Yameinu Amen V'Amen. Thank you very much for listening. We want to thank JFoundations.com. If you could sponsor any of our activities Be another way of addressing and being able to give over Torah to other people. Go on the website and show your support. Thank you very much for joining us.